Hey everybody, here we are already, episode 10 of how I woke up and how I left and how I navigated life in the world, the big bad world that we were so made to be afraid of. And this all happened during COVID, and I gotta say we did pretty well. We were not thrown back into this fear factor of what's happening in the world. We just stayed pretty calm and did our thing, because at the end of the day, I just kept researching and realizing this was not the truth. We cannot run back to it. And that's why I think that working through all of this is very, very important to prove yourself that this was never and is not the truth. Because if something happens in the world and something is going on, if you left but you never worked through those things, you are so inclined to go back. And I was at the point where I kept reading everything, even from our own literature, and recognized, no, this is not the truth. One of the things that I haven't talked about yet that really, really irked me too, and this was from our own literature, was the issue with blood and blood fractions. So I had talked to my J-Dub friends when we left in the episode where I kind of had to break it up with my best friends, and I was showing them literature. And one of the things that I was talking to them about was the issue with blood and how they changed everything, that suddenly blood fractions were allowed. At the time, I have to honestly say, I didn't really think about that a lot. I was kind of just glad that they were being more lenient, and I thought, okay, that's good. But when I started doing research into the organization and our literature, it really irked me. The article in the Watchtower that talks about how we now take blood fractions, the organization is so crafty at how they word things. They word things where you overread them and you don't recognize what they're really saying. Sometimes if you're in foreign language and you have the Watchtower in front of you in a different language, it even makes more sense or is more obvious. But in English, I feel like they are very crafty in how they word things. So the article about blood fractions, it talks about that it is derived from blood donated for medical purposes. It says that in the literature. And yet they're saying you're now allowed to take blood fractions if your conscience allows you that. Wait a minute, hold up. It says blood fractions are derived from blood donated for medical purposes. We're not allowed to donate blood. So these blood fractions, they come from blood that is donated. Yet you as a Jehovah's Witness, if you go donate blood, you will be disfellowshipped. How in the world, how did we not even think about this? Blood fractions come from blood donations that are stored on shelves. And actually, if you want to take a blood fraction, so many more blood donations have to go in that. I'm going to try to find the statistics on it, but it's wild. And while we're on this topic, so this really kind of shook me because I'm thinking, wait, that's weird. We are now allowed to take this, and yet it is derived from blood, but just how they worded it. For medical purposes. Yeah, blood transfusions are for medical purposes too. It prevents people from dying. And isn't it really, if you think about it, if you think about Jonestown, and we're willing to die because the organization said do not take a blood transfusion. We're willing to die because we have this prospect of everlasting life and paradise. We feel like we're dying faithful. Didn't the people at Jonestown feel the same way? And do we even have a right to make this decision for our children? And this was one of the things I talked about with my mom too, even as Pimi. I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know. That seems like really crazy. And my mom, as chill as they always were, she's like, you don't have to worry about that, because if anything happens with the kids, the government will swoop in and take custody away for you for a while, and then like force a blood transfusion on the child. And I thought, phew, then it's not on my conscience, but the kids are saved. Like, I mean, really, like you make these mental gymnastics to give yourself a pass. But it's just so sad that people are in that position that they truly feel unfaithful to God if they take a blood transfusion. They feel like they're unfaithful to God if they save the life of their kid. However, here's another nugget that I stumbled upon in my research that I never really realized. There is a Jewish law that Jesus abided by. It's pekuah nefesh. And it means that life is worth more than the law. And that is why Jesus saved a donkey on the Sabbath, because the donkey's life was worth more than to break the law. And really, that is something that we should have thought about. Does God care so much if we break a rule or a law that we should sacrifice our children for this, or our own life? So many people die because of this blood transfusion thing. I had one of my really, really good friends. She died on her birthday, 29 years old. She had internal bleeding, and she died faithfully, they said, because she wouldn't accept a blood transfusion. And at the time, I really thought, well, paradise is near. I will see her soon. She has already passed away for 20 years. It was a long time ago. And here all these people, like mothers in labor, babies. There's an interview with John Cedars, Lloyd Evans, and Daniel Graves, and he talks about being in Bethel and being pulled into the liaison committee, which kind of helped him waking up, because he realized how many people refuse blood transfusions and die, and it is a huge number. I'll try to link that video because that was eye-opening. I mean, that's really, truly shocking. How is that different than Jonestown, when people sacrifice their life in order to die faithfully, so to speak? And I feel like when they changed the rule on not being able to take an organ donation, which they actually wrote back in the day that it is similar to cannibalism. If you accept an organ donation, it's similar to cannibalism. Okay, all right. And then they change it, and now you can take an organ. But all those people that died because they listened to these man-made rules, and then with the blood transfusion, when they changed it, and they changed it to blood fractions, and they said you can use your own conscience, why not just change it to you can use your own conscience with this whole issue anyways? Because it's not up to these dudes to decide what you feel is important. And talking about the scripture that says to abstain from blood, if we talk about that, they drank blood back in the Romans days. They drank it, and that was very unsanitary and unhealthy. It is not the same thing. It's not the same thing as taking medically screened blood that may save your life as a transfusion. So there's a difference. Plus, we have to think about like how long ago all this was written. A lot of these things don't apply to modern life, and on a different continent. It's a different society nowadays. Those things don't apply anymore. So I just wanted to touch base with that because that just really bugged me. And I did send that to my friends too, because when you see it in print on the Watchtower Library, you're just mind boggled. And it is amazing how many things you can find on the Watchtower Library and show people straight from the Watchtower Library, and they are shocked. I sent one of my friend's moms, she was really worried about like that I was leaving the truth, and I sent her an article from the Awake, but it was older, and I guess it kind of looked weird to her because she was freaking out on me. You're reading apostate stuff. And I said, no, this is our literature. And she goes, oh, I'm so sorry. But it just shows you like the fear of apostasy and how immediately, total freak out, but it was our literature. So I will link those articles in there too, because it was really interesting. So now we were going through COVID, and while we're waking up, I have a cousin who I have grown up with. He is like a brother to me. We grew up like brother and sister. And I will not tell much of his story because he told me that he wants to tell his own story, and I'll have him on the podcast and interview him because his story is pretty powerful. And kudos to him. He found freedom early on, but he was disfellowshipped. And so thankfully, my grandparents especially, they were human and had a heart. So they did always stay in touch with him. And it wasn't how it was supposed to be. It wasn't like really close how it was supposed to be. But they didn't completely 100% shun him. And I would talk to him like rarely, but just sometimes like touch base. Like when my grandpa passed away, I would call him, and we went together and we spread the ashes together, and we just had like, I mean, when I see him, it's like that close bond is there right away because he always feels like a brother to me. So what a shame to even have lost all those years of not being able to be really close. Well, so now we were waking up, and I told him, and I called him, I said, or I don't remember, maybe I texted him and I said, I am no longer a Jehovah's Witness. And saying that is like hardcore. And he cried. I mean, and I cried. And it was just, he couldn't even believe it. He could not even believe it. And then you're kind of worried about, you know, are they going to go back? Are they really out? Are they going to be drawn back? But having him was also so wonderful and so supportive. And like, we lost so many people leaving. Well, I gained my brother. Like, I gained my brother and his family, and I'm just like so happy about that because we have each other, and it means a lot. And it's just like a reuniting, and I'm very grateful to him for not being upset with us for having shunned him at all, because it's wrong that people do that. It is wrong. And I'm just so happy to have him in my life again. So we were talking, and we were, you know, just kind of having each other through COVID and chatting. And so one day he says to me, you know, you've been single a couple years now. A couple years went by, and you should start dating again. And I thought, no way. How? I have kids. Like, this never, I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. It's not going to happen. And he's like, are you kidding? We're going to put you on a dating site, and you're going to start dating again. And I just was like, ha, 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 okay, whatever, dude. And so during COVID, you know, you had a lot of time, and he and we pulled up Bumble and we set up a profile, and I'm just laughing. I'm like, this is so not me. Plus, this fear of the world is a little bit still in me, plus worldly people, plus I am not going to be good at worldly dating because I'm just not like that, you know, and all these things are going through my mind. I almost find it like amusing, like it's just not going to happen. And I can't even imagine. And he's like, you're doing this. This is how people meet each other. And he's just really motivating, like, you can do this. You can do hard things. And so he set me up on Bumble, and we start, you know, we're on Zoom together. So I'm kind of like starting to swipe, and I'm just like, no. And he goes, slow down, start reading people's profile. Like, there will be someone that's like nice. And that's really my main thing was, I just wanted to find a nice person. Like, if I was going to date, and maybe it was nice to date, just a nice person, someone who's caring, someone who's honest. But I had it in the back of my mind, am I really going to be able to trust anybody? Plus, I feel very affected by cult life. Like, who's going to understand that? Who's going to understand where I came from? And who's going to, like, put up with me now and all the quirks that we have ingrained in us? And I have trust issues. Can I even trust someone? I think I'm so ruined from this relationship. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Don't even think that far. Just meet someone for coffee. And he said, dinner is probably even too much because if you don't like each other, you're stuck. But just go meet people for coffee. And he wasn't wrong. And I had to really get over myself. And I was kind of worried about what my mom would think too, because I was so sure she would be really against this and thinking like world and you know, all this stuff. But she was like, okay, just be safe. And I swiped on the first person, and I have to give it to this guy. Thank you for being just a nice person to talk to. He wasn't mean. He wasn't judgmental. We talked on the phone a few times. And then we met for coffee. And he was really nice. And I'm so grateful, because if this would have been a bad experience, I would have been done with it. But we started talking, and it turns out that he grew up as a Jehovah's Witness as well. And he couldn't believe that I'd only been out not that long. So he was kind of worried, like, I don't know if you worked through this. You're going to go back. And I'm like, no, I won't. And he's like, I don't know. I think you're going to be going back. And I'm like, no, I don't. He was just like, well, but I think it's just when you read a lot and you watch a lot of these videos and you work through it, that's the goal, is to get to the point where you're like, no doubt this was never the truth. And I was definitely there. So I think that's what allowed me to date too. They were not in charge of us anymore. And dating as a Jehovah's Witness itself is so incredibly hard, because there's just not a lot of people. It's a small community, and there's not a lot of people. And I feel so bad for sisters, especially because I think it's 2/3 sister, 1/3 brothers. So meeting someone is really hard. But I had a friend in my congregation who really, really wanted to date. And let's be real, dating gives you social skills. Dating is part of life. It's part of teenage life. And it is robbed from us when we don't have any potential partners there. And this girl, she just wanted to have a boyfriend. She wanted to meet somebody. She is now 21. She's never dated anyone. She's never kissed anyone. She hasn't held hands, and she was depressed. And I feel for her, because it's not going to look better in the future, you know? And her parents have raised her really, really strict, so it affected her too. I think she's just kind of like from a really strict spiritual household, and it's going to be tough. It's just going to be really tough, and it is tough. And she was depressed. She would say things how depressed she was, and to me that's really heartbreaking, how they rob your teenage years and your social skills, like, and all those things. Plus then, you know, they made the Jehovah's Witness dating site, and immediately we have like, you should not be going on that dating site. And even my mom back then was like, why not? Why can't people meet each other like that? There is no scripture. This is not in the Bible that we can't have a JW dating site. And yet the society was so against it. And then they would say, and we shouldn't be matchmaking. Well, if you knew a nice brother and a nice sister that would go well together, what is wrong with introducing themselves? They are so cruel. So I know in one country in Europe, at the conventions, because it's really hard to meet somebody, the young ones, they kind of started like outlining their badge in red, and it meant you were single, and so they could kind of find each other. Got squashed immediately. Why can't they do that? It's so hard. People are lonely. They want to meet a partner. It's such baloney. I feel so bad because it is so hard for people. So I will wrap this episode up here. Tomorrow I will continue with leaving the J-dubs and being worldly and dating. And this story is kind of funny with this date. Y'all will laugh, but I'll keep it for tomorrow's episode. Bye!